Men are natural leaders. Men are natural leaders. Give me 5 examples of you leading anything in your life. It could be a group project. It could be a sports team. It could be a club or organization. I need 5 examples. It could be from when you're a child to now. Give me 5 examples. Because if you have zeros, I hate to break it to you, baby, you a follower, natural born follower. And it's okay. We need more Indians than Chiefs anyway. But come around these parks, I've been a leader in various capacities in my life. So don't come around these parts expecting me to just follow you blindly. Absolutely not. What you know about leading? You don't know nothing. You don't even have evidence of being a good leader. You don't even have experience. But you think just because you're a man, you're a good leader. What? Please don't piss me off. Like, come on. Let's be so for real right now. Like, let's not act dense.
Society keeps telling us that men are natural born leaders. And from biology to psychology and even God, yes, God has ordained men to be leaders. So women should just take the back seat and let men lead. Women should not vie for positions of leadership, be it in companies, in the corporate world, in politics, and definitely not in the home. Yes, women should not try to lead their lives in the home. They should just hand over their entire lives to men in their lives to control, whether it be their father or their husbands. But when you look at the stats, you look at the data, this is nothing but a lie because men have never been leaders. When you look at the qualities of what makes a leader, particularly what makes a good leader, men have none of those characteristics. And on the contrary, it is actually women that have those characteristics. Look at the characteristics like ingenuity, decisiveness, strategic planning, adaptability, effective communication, emotional intelligence. When you look at these characteristics of what makes a good leader, do men as a group come to mind? Do men as a group come to mind when you are thinking of ingenuity, when you are thinking of being decisive, when you are thinking of taking action without being prompted, without being like pushed? These characteristics are not characteristics that are normally associated with men. So why do society, despite the mountain of evidence proving otherwise, still perceive men to be better leaders than women? Is it simply a lapse in judgment from men and society? Or is it a deliberate plan to push women into the background and prompt these men up as leaders despite them being grossly incompetent? Let's get right into it.
Talk about the most common misogynistic arguments made by men and how to debunk them. Category is men are just natural born leaders. Now make room for my dick on the subway. Now, a little PSA some of y'all need. I'm going to be talking about research here. And when I'm talking about research, I mean a body of work that has been built upon for decades, looks at data that is replicable, and has been included in peer-reviewed journals. That is not to be confused with what many of my male commenters like to present, which is articles from, mensrights.com and taken straight from the library of Hustler University. And this research shows that there is no scientific genetic basis for thinking that someone's sex has an influence on their intelligence, their cognitive abilities, their personality traits, their moral reasoning, so on and so forth. What biologists and developmental psychologists will tell you is that men and women genetically are more similar than they are different. In fact, human beings on the whole are 99.9% identical. And making judgments about typical male brains or typical female brains isn't taking into account that only about 1 to 8% of the world's population have what would be considered typical male or female brains. Typical female meaning better interconnectedness between lobes, typical male being generally larger. The reality is that most people fall somewhere in the middle. We also have to consider that 1 in 50 people are actually what would be categorized as intersex. And just to put that into perspective, that is the same proportion of people that will have red hair. So instead, we have to look towards socialization, social norms, cultural norms, environment, and how that impacts how people behave, how they think. And what mountains of research has found is that it's this, the socialization aspect, that accounts for the most substantive gender differences. I know some of y'all are going to be like, well, what about testosterone? Testosterone just makes men naturally aggressive and dominant. But here again, we can look to the research, and it shows that this is simply not true. There's a lot of work looking at prenatal exposure to increase levels of testosterone, and it's found that those children throughout development show no difference in dominance, assertiveness, or ability. The reality is that testosterone is associated with things like deeper voice and hairiness, which we associate with typical masculinity. So it's easy for folks to draw the conclusion that testosterone must also cause violence and dominance, but that's simply not true. It's just a justification for what men have been socialized and rewarded to do. I'm going to need a part 2. Stick with me.
I've always said that the differences between men and women when it comes to behavior is largely due to socialization and not due to biology. Yes, and deep down, men and society knows this fact. That's why society and men are always clamoring for there to be a father figure or a father in the home. Yes, they always want, especially when a boy child is involved, for that boy child to be raised by a father figure, a masculine figure, so that that boy child will become masculine. If they thought that, oh, these things are biology and it just happens naturally, why don't they just leave the child with the mother and the child just become naturally masculine? But they know deep down that these behavioral differences between men and women are largely due to socialization. That's why they don't want women raising their sons. They will always want them to have a father in the home, because they know a boy that is raised by his mom and other women around it, that boy is going to be more feminine. That boy is going to be more soft. That boy is going to be more in tune with his emotion and with his feminine side. That boy is going to be more empathetic. But they don't want boys to be that. They don't want boys to be soft. They don't want boys to be more feminine, more like in tune with their emotion. They don't want these boys to be more empathetic. They want them to be aggressive. They want them to have this masculine trait, this aggressive masculine trait. And that is why they keep clamoring for these boys to have a father figure in the home. But they will not admit this fact that socialization is the reason for the differences between men and women. They keep on saying, oh, it's biology. Oh, men are natural leaders. Because they know that once they admit the fact that, oh, it is not actually a thing of nature, it is a thing of socialization, that means that they also have to admit that women and young girls can also be socialized and mentored into becoming good leaders. And then they will no longer have an excuse to push women to the background and make it difficult for them to attain leadership positions.
And now I know the next question will be, well, why are so many societies patriarchal if it's not the natural way things should be? And the answer to this is that this is just based on a very popular misconception. Patriarchal societies date back like less than 10,000 years ago. Humans actually evolved as an egalitarian species, and we know this from a variety of evidence, like the fact that we show the least size disparity between male and females of all the apes, and equality between the sexes was actually evolutionarily beneficial, right? So if you had a man and a woman investing equally in child rearing, for example, those children were more likely to survive. And we know that there are modern hunter-gatherer societies and matriarchal societies, right? So it is no more natural for us to be in a patriarchal society than to be in one of those. We are not programmed for male dominance. Now I can predict the next retort will be, well, if men aren't natural-born leaders, then how come so many men are CEOs and billionaires? How come every US president has been a man? And this is because of a little thing most men don't think exists: gender bias. This obviously plays out in a myriad of ways, and I could, record 18 hours of TikToks on it. I'll give you one example here. So there's a fair amount of research where they take identical resumes, but they put a typical male name on the top of one and a typical female name on the top of the other and see how people react. And because we live in a patriarchal society, those studies consistently show that the male resume will rate the candidate higher on competence, on hireability. They will offer a higher salary. They will offer more mentorship opportunities. It's truly wild. So we basically live in a sham meritocracy, right? We're not picking the best person for the job. We're picking who we prefer based on gender biases. We're picking from a pool of mostly men who get to that space because of privilege, because of perceived confidence, charisma, and not competence. Don't you ever wonder what would happen if we spent less time telling women to be more confident and more time just finding leaders that are actually competent? Yet men continue to want to know the business case for women in leadership positions. And we have overwhelming data to support that women are absolutely better leaders than men. So you have to be living under a rock at this point if you have not read at least one think piece talking about the research that shows that women are overwhelmingly rated as more effective as leaders than men. So over the past few decades, this research has shown that women consistently outperform men when we're looking at the key traits necessary for effective leadership. And I'm just going to read a few of them. They rate better in humility, self-awareness, self-control, moral sensitivity, social skills, emotional intelligence. They're pro-social. They have more kindness, things like this. Meanwhile, men score much higher on what are called dark side personality traits. So these include things like aggression, narcissism, psychopathy, and Machiavellianism. And I know men will continue to ask, well, why are there so many of us in leadership roles then? And it is because we are not picking people based on talent. We are picking people based on gender biases, conceptions of traditional gender roles. Our institutions have a problem of systemic sexism. If we actually picked leaders based on competence and talent, then we would have many more women leaders than men. And research shows that America's GDP would be $12 trillion higher if we were making advances towards gender equality. But this is not a narrative you often hear because men are interested in perpetuating the status quo that keeps them in power. And the reality is that feminism is a movement that is trying to achieve this equity, right? And it is data driven based on all of these things that I have shared. Meanwhile, sexism is based on all out lies, and it only further and faster propels us towards democratic collapse and destruction.
The fact that women make better leaders than men is something that have always been known. Why do you think that whenever you see these big executives, these big leaders in big positions, it is always men? But when you look at who is their assistant, who is their secretary, the person that does the actual work, the day-to-day running of that company, it is always a woman. Think about it. They know that when it comes to getting the work done, women are more capable in doing the work. Women are more competent. But when it comes to having that position of leadership, society always wants to place a man there. Even in the times of our grandparents and great-grandparents, when women were being denied higher education, women were still being allowed to take positions of secretaries and assistants to assist these men in their leadership position, because deep down they've always known that men are not good leaders. Men need women aiding them to be leaders, and without women aiding them, men cannot lead nothing. And these women are the actual leaders. They are the ones that are actually doing the work, while these men are just there to collect the glory, collect the recognition, and be there symbolically as leaders in these organizations and in these political offices.
So listening to men, let them tell it that they're the leaders. They're the leaders. They're the natural leaders simply because they were born with peen. Like no leadership skills. Leaders are not actually born, honey. They're made. But if men were such natural leaders, then why is it that you had to literally strip away all rights from women, had us not be able to work, not be able to do anything at all for ourselves, took away everything that we were, and then beat us into submission. That's not leadership. That is oppression. Men are not leaders. They are not natural leaders. And they can't even grasp the fact that they're not. They literally think, I came out of the womb with a penis, therefore I am. That is some stupid non-logic coming from the logical ones. Men are idiots.
I stand by the opinion that men are not inherent leaders, that they are not meant to be leaders, that they are not biologically wired to be leaders, and that it does not come natural to them. I believe this for so many reasons. One, they're simply just not good at it, and you can tell that it is a forced nature upon them. If it was a natural, inherent part of their being, they wouldn't have to assert themselves so aggressively over other people. And I always go back to this perspective of like why so many men join the military, and obviously like there are class reasons for this. Poverty is one of them, economic status is one of them, but men like to be told what to do. They like to take orders, they like to know the list of things that they need to do, and then they just do them. They're not the ones who are out there like strategizing, they are the doers in the narrative. I think about this in heterosexual relationships as well too, because men want to be perceived as head of households, and yet they don't know where shit is in the kitchen. They don't know where shit is at the grocery store. They don't know how to take care of their children without the mother of the child being there. They're always looking to the women in their lives to tell them how things operate. Not only do they do this with their mothers, but they also do this with their wives, and then also their daughters.
So someone said, so if the men can't even do it, who the hell are we supposed to look at for leadership? And that's why I've been saying they are not your leaders. Someone that cannot see you cannot protect you. Someone that cannot hear you cannot protect you. Someone that don't even really care about the concerns you have, right, as a woman, they can't protect you. And I'm going to just say this off topic, but a lot of y'all pick me women that's been raised by this patriarchy to think that men are here to save you. Before you think a motherfucker can save you, I need you to think that, is this going to be a man that's going to run or be able to protect you when he's being attacked by other men? Is this a man that cares about what men perceive or think of him? Because if so, that man can protect you. He cannot protect you. Men are often very afraid of other men. And as a woman, they're our natural predators. So what makes you think that if this man's afraid of other men and what other men think, what makes you think that he's going to protect you against what other men think and do towards you?
I'm supposed to believe that straight men who want women to do everything for them are the natural leaders of human society? Like, these grown-ass babies who don't even know how to pick up after themselves or cook dinner for their kids are the natural leaders of the household, of companies, of government. Like, get the fuck out of here.
It just really works in my marriage that like my husband is the leader of things. Like he leads me, he leads our marriage, he leads our household, and women would be much happier if they learned to let their man lead. Cool, I'm glad that works for you. What is he leading in the household? Is he planning all the meals? No, I do that. I manage the household, he leads it. Again, that doesn't explain anything. What is he doing that's leading the household? Well, he works, and he works more than I do, and he makes more money than I do. So I do all the household chores. No, that's fine. I'm not asking about how you divide chores and who works what hours. I'm asking what he does that's leading you. Like, I'm not gonna wait for him to get home to do laundry. Again, that sounds like you taking the initiative and you leading the chores. No, that's management. It's different. And like, I'm very difficult to lead. So we're not perfect at it. We're trying to learn. Like, I have to learn how to be led. Girl, do you understand that none of this makes any sense? I'm not going to sit here and be judged and answer all these crazy questions. No, listen, if you're happy, then I'm happy. I'm just saying people keep saying my husband leads me, but they never give any examples of how he actually leads. It sounds like you haven't learned how to be led yet. No, I'm feral. I will never be led.
Men claim to be the leaders in the household, but when asked what is actually your role as a leader in the household, these men go silent. These men don't actually have a role as leaders in the household. At most, they are rulers and not leaders. Their aim in the household is not to make sure the household is running smoothly. It's not to make sure the household is running in a orderly manner. That job, it is being left to the woman. Yes, it's being left to the woman to manage the household. But they claim that position of leadership while giving the main hard work to women once again to do the day-to-day running and management of the household. While they actually claim to be the so-called leaders that do nothing but cause problems. Yes, these men just want control. They want control over their wives. They want control over their children. And they use their so-called God-ordained roles as leaders as an excuse to exert that control over their wives and their children and the household as a whole. These men do not actually want the responsibility of running a household. Uncle Ben from Spider-Man once said, with great power comes great responsibility. These men want all the power with none of the responsibility. They want the power of being the quote-unquote leader of the household, but they want none of the responsibility for the household. When the household is not running well, when the children are not well behaved, when things are not in order in the house, all the blame always fall on the woman and not the man that is supposed to be the leader of the household. Even if you check biblical scriptures, when you look at the story of the Proverbs 31 woman, that woman is basically running the entire household. She does the cooking, the cleaning, everything, and she even goes out to earn money to bring back home to feed the family. The man does nothing. All he does is he hangs around with his fellow elders and with his fellow men. Nothing else. He does nothing to contribute to the household, let alone to lead the household. And that is why you also see Bible verses telling women that, oh, a wise woman builds her home, but a foolish woman brings it down. These scriptures tell women to submit to their husband's leadership, but the same scripture also tell them that they are solely responsible for everything that goes wrong when their husbands lead them and their households down a pit.
One of the reasons we've ended up in this situation around the world where we've got so many things that are just going wrong at so many levels is because of this patriarchal lie that goes back centuries, which is about men being natural leaders, that, the leadership is a natural thing that we've got. We've got those qualities of, emotional resilience. We got our shit together. We're strategic. We're tactical. We're strong, blah, blah, blah. None of which is true. So what you end up with is a situation where the world is designed specifically to get men in leadership positions based on that lie. The problem then comes, it's not just that, but it's what the men do after that, which is they surround themselves with other men. And the trouble is that men are so submissive. Men like taking orders from other men. So you get these incompetent, powerful men in roles that they're not equipped for, surrounded by men who are just kissing their ass and doing whatever they're told. And they're incapable and incompetent as well. So they've probably got to where they have got to because of the system and how it's designed to fast track them into places that they're just not ready to be in. I mean, a lot of this plays out in the corporate world as well, where you get, there's a lot of research out there, isn't there, about men and careers and how you end up with men leading big corporate organizations without any skills to do so. So that's where the confirmation bias comes in, with incapable men at the top surrounded by submissive men giving orders that these men are just following.
There's a lie that women are often told very early on, that men are more logical than women. Therefore, of course, it follows that men are better leaders. They are a safer pair of hands, and that women can't be trusted because they're too led by their emotions. Now, it is a lie, because the lie, though, only works, and this myth only works, if we pretend that there's only one kind of logic, and there isn't. Now, just hang with me here, because I think about this a lot, right? Logic simply means processing information in a way that leads to the completion or execution of a task or leads to a decision or outcome. But here's the thing, there are different types of logic. Each one only works in certain environments. I think about this because it really and truly, the logic that an engineer would use would be different to the logic that a baker would use. The logic that a doctor might use will be different to the logic that a judge will use. But the logics are all equally valuable because they are contextualized depending upon the decision, the outcome, or the task. And the thing is, if you apply the wrong logic to the wrong situation, you're going to get poor, low quality, or damaging results. And so, What we have is a society and a culture and systems of power that have rewarded and incentivized men for a very specific type of logic. That logic tends to be linear, abstract, detached, and task focused. Now, that can be really useful for decisions, outcomes, tasks that are system-based, machine-based, hierarchy-based, also control-based. Isn't that funny? Because what do we see patriarchy and systems of power wanting to do, seeking to do, is treat people like they're machines, systemize everything. It thrives and rests on hierarchy and authority and control. If you're a woman navigating systems of power, but also interpersonal power dynamics with men, of course, the kind of logic you're going to be subject to is going to be the male-rewarded, male-coded logic. But it's not universally superior. Of course, that kind of logic does not work very well in relationships, leadership involving real human beings, moral decision-making, and I know that's a tricky word, morality, but when it comes to ethics, and then also risk assessment involving safety. Now, on the other hand, women are taught to ignore, dismiss, deny their embodied logic. The logic that comes from your body. That's where we talk about instinct, intuition, even the sensations in your body. Your nervous system is basically a logic system, but not in the way we've been taught. Your body itself is an entire system that has a logic to it. The system is logical, right? So women are taught to ignore all of that, not pattern recognize. Ignore your nervous system. Ignore relational intuition. Why? Because actually, emotions and sensations and intuition are very useful. Very useful. Because actually, those systems are built for not only survival, we can go beyond that. They're built for safety. They're built also for you to thrive. But of course, systems of power don't want you to thrive as a woman. They don't want you to lock in to this innate logic. And that's why women are often told, like I say, to ignore pain, discomfort, injustice, disrespect, to ignore fear when it comes up as an instinct, like your antenna, right? Ignore your gut. Because once you ignore the logic that is unique to you, you become easier to override, easier to bamboozle, easier to trap, easier to contain, easier to convince, to forego your rights, to forego listening to your self-respect decision-making framework. And this is why it's really important that we reject these kinds of this conditioning. We do not continue to obey these invisible contracts around men being more logical than women.
The whole anecdote of men being more logical while women being more emotional has been disproven over and over again. Men and women feel similar levels of emotions. The only difference is that men are socialized to bottle up their positive emotions like being sad, being sympathetic, and so on, while they are encouraged to express their anger and their rage and their aggression. Women on the flip side are encouraged to express their emotions. Although studies show that women are more likely to express their emotions, which are typically more positive emotions like sadness, sympathy, and the rest, women are also more likely to keep their emotions under control because instead of bottling it all up until it explodes, they express their emotions and express how they feel. So they are less likely to act on their emotions and make drastic decisions based on their emotions. Men on the flip side, because they are more likely to bottle up their emotions, because they are socialized to bottle up their emotions, they are more likely to act on these their negative emotions. Yes, men are more likely to act on their negative emotions or simply any emotions that they feel, because they've been bottling up these emotions for so long and they do not know when these emotions will just blow up in not just their face but in other people's face. That is why you see that men are more likely to commit violent crimes, and men are also more likely to attempt self-deletion. So what happens is that both genders actually feel emotions, feel equal levels of emotions, but one gender, being the female, expresses her emotions and is able to let it off her chest, while the male is socialized to bottle up their emotions until the emotions blow up in not just their face but in the face of others. So while women are more likely to express their emotions, men on the flip side are more likely to act on their emotions. They are more likely to take negative actions and violent actions based on what they are feeling at the moment.
Men have always ruled the world. That's just the natural order of things. Welcome to Dumb Shit People Say I Can Disprove in just under a minute. It's not uncommon to hear some men push the narrative that men have always been the dominant gender, but that couldn't be more wrong. For majority of human history, we lived in hunter-gatherer societies, which were, for the most part, egalitarian. And as anthropological research shows, there were no strictly defined hierarchies of power or social status. What's more, it's not only men who did the hunting as it was previously believed. Both men and women hunted and both men and women gathered. And they largely lived together as equals. Now, the shift from these egalitarian societies to more patriarchal ones happened only around 6,000 to 10,000 years ago as a result of the agricultural revolution. And this is also where all sorts of inequalities started to emerge. So if you consider that we've been hunter-gatherers for around 200,000 years and men have only ruled this world for around 10,000, it's equality that's the norm and patriarchy the exception.
Sorry, I just left the gym, but do you know what I've realized? I've realized that a lot of so-called traditional men are really just tyrants role-playing as leaders. A lot of men talk about leading women the same way bad bosses talk about managing employees. They demand obedience, but they haven't earned respect. They want submission without service. They want control, not commitment. I've led teams, 50 plus employees, and I have learned that if you lead from entitlement instead of example, people might obey you out of fear or for a paycheck, but never out of loyalty or respect. And they definitely will not be going the extra mile for you without building deep resentment. And isn't that just the mirror image of a lot of your traditional relationships? She will stay as long as you pay the bills and keep her afraid that you're going to fire her and replace her. But should it really surprise you that she's already planning her exit? I often wonder how much that plays into the divorce rate. Leadership is not about hierarchy. It's about humility. You can't call yourself a leader if everyone under your leadership just feels controlled, and you are not entitled to a leadership position just because you were born a man.
I'm going to address the fact that he says that women are like children in a minute, but I wanted to start by saying that because it reminded me of this. Isn't it interesting that everything that the patriarchy says and everything that guys like this say that women are is actually what men are? Let's start with the basics. Okay. Women are bad drivers. Actually, men are worse drivers. So bad that their insurance rates are higher. They cause more accidents, they get more traffic tickets, and they have more DUIs. Women talk too much. Actually, men talk more. Multiple studies across different contexts like school and work have concluded that it is in fact true that men talk more and perceive that they have talked less. We all know that men are known to interrupt women, talk over women, and silence them and take their ideas. Women are so emotional. Women are not the ones that are taking a pew-pew and ventilating a grocery store and its shoppers. We are also not the ones declaring war because we are incapable of working something out with another world leader. Next, women are mooches. If you think that you are entitled to somebody in your house cleaning up, taking care of the home, taking care of the children while you do whatever you're doing, you're the mooch. Now let's address this guy's comment. First, actually, neurologists are uncovering that women are natural-born leaders. They looked at their brain scans, they looked at their behaviors. We are better leaders. So anyways, let's indulge what you're saying for a minute. If men are out there leading, what are women doing? Are they in the home? Are they cleaning up after you? Are they taking care of your dishes and your clothing? If so, You're the child, because that's what a mommy does. And if you're incapable of doing those things for yourself and you think it's too hard, you are a child.
The notion of men being better leaders than women is false, and it has been proven to be false over and over again by multiple studies. In fact, the opposites have actually been proven to be true. Yes, women have been proven by multiple studies to be better leaders, more effective leaders. Women have been proven to have more qualities that are associated with being a good leaders. Yes, emotional intelligence, good communication, being decisive. The whole notion of men being natural born leaders is false. Neither men nor women are natural born leaders. Nobody is a natural born leader. Leaders are not born. Leaders are made. Leaders are mentored. Leaders are built into the leaders that they are. Nobody and no gender is born with a leadership code embedded in them. Leadership skills and leadership characteristics are cultivated and nurtured in individuals. And the funniest part is that society actually nurture and socialize women to be more inclined into leadership than men. Yes, society do not nurture men or socialize men to become leaders. They actually just nurture and socialize these men to be rulers, to be controlling, to be manipulative, to be narcissistic. They don't socialize these men to actually have and embody leadership characteristics and leadership skills. They do this to women on the flip side. They embody women to be decisive, to be emotionally intelligent, to be sympathetic, to be motivational, to be encouraging. These leadership skills are socialized into women, while men are simply socialized to be controlling, to be lazy, and to be dependent on women and the labor of women. Thanks for staying to the end of the video. Give it a thumbs up if you found this topic interesting, and also subscribe to the channel to help me reach a larger audience. Also, check out these videos right here.